Joe Biden isn't worried about China. Has he not been paying attention to all those national security reports? Or is his view colored by his son's business dealings in China? Welcome back to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. These are the times that try men's souls, the U.S. presidential election cycle. And there's one issue that will be at the center of it.
China!
That's right, China. For decades, the Chinese Communist Party has waged what it calls an unrestricted war against the United States. That means fighting the U.S. with everything but actual bullets and soldiers. It involves stealing U.S. tech, using unfair trade practices, exporting fentanyl, a drug killing thousands of Americans each year, and even pressuring American corporations to censor Americans on American soil. And if those problems aren't bad enough, Chinese officials are influencing U.S. politicians through their family members. Dianne Feinstein is a California senator. She was one of the loudest voices pushing for free trade with China in the 1990s. At the same time, her husband was investing millions of dollars there. When George W. Bush was president, his brother Neil got a $400,000 a year contract with a Chinese firm. It manufactured semiconductors, a field Bush's brother had no experience in. That company was also backed by the son of then Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. This type of political family business is more common than most of us would like to admit, among both Democrats and Republicans. That's according to Sarah Chase, the author of Thieves of State: Why Corruption Threatens Global Security.
Almost any senior name that I start researching, I run into practices like this. It is extraordinarily widespread, and that's my question. How did we all convince ourselves that this isn't corrupt?
And speaking of widespread but technically not corrupt practices, Democratic presidential candidate and former VP Joe Biden. As vice president, Biden dealt with China on more than one occasion, like when he convinced Chinese leader Xi Jinping to let more Hollywood movies into the country. And as Biden told Hollywood executives, that helped double their box office shares, which is great for everyone, except for people who don't like giving an authoritarian regime the power to censor American movies, which explains why Disney's new live-action Bambi remake had Bambi's mom killed by American imperialists, and why Bambi was played by Jackie Chan. Anyway, given Joe Biden's foreign policy experience, he turned some heads earlier this year when he dismissed the threat of China.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the west. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system. I mean, they're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not competition for us.
Is that just ignorance? Not according to President Donald Trump, and he knows a thing or two about ignorance. He accuses China of buying off Joe Biden through his son, Hunter Biden.
And that's probably why China, for so many years, has had a sweetheart deal where China rips off the USA, because they deal like people with Biden, where they give the son $1.5 billion.
That's a big claim. And Trump definitely has no personal motivation for accusing the Bidens. He just wants what's best for America, which is for himself to win the next election. But is there any truth to Trump's claim? Well, that's where things get complicated. It's not like Chinese leader Xi Jinping just drove up to Hunter Biden's home with a sack full of money. I mean, Xi Jinping is the leader of the unfree world. He has people give out the sacks of money for him. Back to Hunter Biden. He's one of the founders of an international investment firm called Rosemont Seneca Partners. Just a quick side note, Hunter Biden and Rosemont Seneca are also involved in the whole Ukraine thing that's at the center of the impeachment inquiry into Trump. We did a separate episode about that called Trump, Biden and Ukraine explained. The link is below. In June 2013, at least some members of Rosemont Seneca worked with a Chinese private equity fund called Bohai Capital to create a new fund called BHR Partners. But BHR still needed the Chinese government to approve a business license. And this is where things get a bit murky. In December 2013, while Joe Biden was vice president, Hunter Biden joined his father on a trip to China. While there, Hunter introduced his father to Jonathan Li, who ran Bohai Capital. According to The New Yorker, Hunter, shortly after arriving in Beijing on December 4th, helped arrange for Li to shake hands with his father in the lobby of the American delegation's hotel. Afterward, Hunter and Li had what both parties described as a social meeting. Now that's it, just a handshake. But a handshake with the Vice President of the United States.
What we now know is that 10 days after they returned from that trip, Hunter Biden's small investment firm announced a $1.5 billion private equity deal with the Chinese government. It was an unusual deal. It was done through the Shanghai Free Trade Zone. And in fact, Brett, no other major investment firm had this, not Deutsche Bank, not Goldman, not JP Morgan. So it was a highly, highly unusual deal.
Now that's the $1.5 billion President Trump was talking about. And the biggest shareholder of this newly established BHR is the state-owned Bank of China. The state-owned China Development Bank and China Social Security Fund were also major investors. Now, Hunter Biden's lawyer says the registration for BHR's business license was already submitted to the Chinese government the month before, and the timing of the approval was just a coincidence. But when doing business in China, relationships matter. And for Jonathan Li to be doing business with Hunter Biden and being seen shaking hands with the U.S. Vice President wouldn't have hurt his chances of getting the business license approved or raising funds from a state-owned bank. But that does not mean Joe Biden or Hunter Biden did anything illegal. Still, as the New York Times says, the fact that Chinese state-owned firms were interested in linking arms with Hunter Biden while his father was vice president fits a long pattern of companies owned by or closely tied to foreign governments courting the families of high-ranking American officials. And that fact is why Hunter Biden's business deals are now a risk to his father's presidential campaign. That risk was something Joe Biden's staff knew about even back when this was going on. According to this reporter for The New Yorker, when I asked members of Biden's staff whether they discussed their concerns with the vice president, several of them said that they had been too intimidated to do so. But that version of events might not be the whole story. Hunter Biden's lawyer claims that in 2017, Hunter bought a 10% stake in BHR for $420,000. That implies BHR had a total capitalization of $4.2 million, not $1.5 billion. $4.2 million is a lot less than $1.5 billion. It's like the size of a marble versus a baseball. BHR had earlier said $1.5 billion was a target, not their value at the time. But as of today, BHR's website says they currently manage over 15 billion RMB in assets, which is about 2.1 billion US dollars. It's normal for an investment company to manage more money than it has in capitalization. And it's normal for the amount it manages to go up and down over the years. While Hunter Biden may have paid $420,000 for a 10% stake in 2017, that 10% stake could be worth a whole lot more now, if BHR is managing so much in assets. Hunter Biden's lawyer also said that when Hunter and the others founded BHR in 2013, Hunter joined as an unpaid member of the board. Hunter did not invest in BHR until 2017, after his father had left office. And Hunter's lawyer emphasized that Hunter invested his own money in BHR. Again, this was perfectly legal. But that lawyer forgot to mention what BHR invested in. BHR's investments include Face++, a company that specializes in facial recognition technology used by Chinese police. In 2014, BHR invested in China General Nuclear Power Corporation. A few years later, the U.S. Justice Department would accuse them of stealing nuclear secrets from the U.S., which could cause significant damage to our national security. BHR also worked with the aviation industry of China. That's a major state-owned aerospace and defense company that builds jets for the Chinese military. AVIC has also been accused of stealing U.S. fighter jet designs. In 2015, BHR and AVIC purchased a U.S. auto parts maker. That company specialized in vehicle sealing and anti-vibration technology, and that has military application. So for that deal to go through, it had to be approved by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS. CFIUS makes sure business deals like this don't end up becoming a national security risk. CFIUS approved the BHR-AVIC deal. Now, it's strange that CFIUS would do that considering AVIC had been accused of stealing U.S. fighter jet data. But here's what's now being called a potential conflict of interest by Senate Finance Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley. The Secretary of State in 2015 was John Kerry. John Kerry sat on the CFIUS committee that approved the BHR-AVIC deal. And it so happened that John Kerry's stepson, Christopher Hines, co-founded Rosemont Seneca Partners along with Hunter Biden. It's not clear whether Christopher Hines is directly connected with BHR. So, Joe Biden's son, and possibly John Kerry's stepson, stood to benefit from the deal that CFIUS approved. Did that affect CFIUS's decision? We don't know, but Senator Grassley is looking to find out. So that's how Hunter Biden's business dealings in China are causing problems for Joe Biden's presidential run. In order to smooth this out, last month, Hunter Biden decided to step down from the board of BHR, although he still owns a 10% stake in the company. That could potentially be worth millions, but it's hard to know exactly how much. And the good news for Joe Biden is that as far as we know, even though there may have been a conflict of interest, technically nothing illegal ever happened, because relatives of U.S. officials making money from foreign deals is a thing that happens all the time, including with relatives of Donald Trump. So there's clearly only one solution to the problem. It's time to ban U.S. officials from having relatives. Saddest Thanksgiving ever. What do you think? Leave your comments below. And episodes like this are supported mainly through our crowdfunding website at patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. If you want more unbiased reporting like this, please support us with $1 or more per episode. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.